How is it, everybody? Angela and Phil, we are back today to continue with this conversation about culture and the events that affect our culture. It's interesting. I wanted today to start. I don't know whether you're able to see these two images that I have: a Francis Bacon painting and Kerry James Marshall. Are you able to see it? Let me just see if I can share my screen. This one.
Yep.
I was actually looking for kind of a work of art that would help describe what we are seeing right now, which is, as you know, we had a shooting overnight in which 8 people died. And we've had almost how many shootings? About 9 shootings so far this year. 55 people have died in all those shootings. And it brings this angst in the nation because, as you see, last year, we didn't have any of these shootings, even though we had this issue of the coronavirus lockdown. So it seems like there was a problem with the lockdown, but then on the flip side, we didn't have a lot of shootings that we're now seeing right now. And some people are talking about this as a post-pandemic a resurgence of the shootings. And I was trying to look at something that can describe this situation that we're seeing, but also our aspirations. And I tried to put these two images against each other just to see one that reflects very tenuous kind of peace after the last 4 years, and the other one that basically represents our aspirations. Although Kerry Marshall did not think of it that way. He was thinking of it as part of what he called the invincible people who nobody sees in their neighborhood. People kind of think that they're not there. They've been written off. And so this is a sad day as well. And it's just bad that every time we convene to have a discussion, we have something bad to talk about. According to CNN, there have been about 44 shootings over the last 4 years? That's a lot. 44 shootings, that basically means that every month there's one. Every month there has to be one. And so if you look at what is being done about it, most of the shootings actually are coming as a result of a lot of guns that are out there. Nobody knows how many there are. Congress is working on legislation. I don't know whether it's going to go anywhere that would ban some of these kinds of ammunition, and also to have everybody who wants to buy a gun to have their backgrounds checked, as well as to remove the immunity that gun makers have. Very interesting. I don't know how far it's going to go. This Congress has not been known to be brave enough to go against the gun makers. But at the same time, the Supreme Court is coming up. I think they're about to. They were discussing last week to take a case out of New York, which if they take it, you know what will happen. That case was about New York, I think 2 years ago, decided to ban handguns from being, you cannot walk with a handgun in public.
Open carry.
Yeah, open carry, yes. You cannot walk with that. So, and even that was a very minor change to the law, because you still can carry in the house. for your own personal protection. You also can buy for sport. You can buy as well for hunting. Sport being for target and practice. But then you have a 6-3 majority that will not, in the Supreme Court, that may not allow that to happen. So you see this situation whereby almost every day there's somebody shooting somebody else. And some of these shootings are very nonsensical, like the one that just occurred in Indianapolis overnight. Some of them have to do with mental health, but we shall discuss in detail later on, maybe in the next couple of weeks. And so I wanted to bring you into this and to ask you for your opinions. Where are we now? Where are we going? Are we in this situation of where Francis Bacon calls a carcass? In that image, you can see an animal that has been cut into pieces, and the carcass hung up, and it's kind of a very sad situation. It's repulsive, as opposed to where the kids are running around, which is our aspiration, where the kids are running around the neighborhood. So Phil, start us off, please.
Well, George, I'm looking at the front page of today's New York Times, where they're listing right up here, major U.S. mass shootings in 2021. So you have Indianapolis, which actually, it was the third one in Indianapolis this year. The one the other night, at least 8 killed. March 13th, another one, 4 killed. January 24th, 5 killed. Boulder, Colorado in March, 10 killed. Orange, California, 4 killed. Allen, Texas, 4 killed. Rock Hill, South Carolina, April 7th, 6 killed. Atlanta, of course, March 16th, 8 killed, and on and on and on. And there's this kind of like kabuki theater that we go through every time one of these things happens with, okay, what was the shooter's motives? And we give the families their grief, their space to mourn for a couple of days. Then we move on to the next one. And of course, the people who are pro-gun regulation will once again say, look, this has to stop. We have to do something about it. And the people who are against gun regulation will go on and make their arguments about why, this is unfortunate, but we have our freedom in this country and blah, 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 blah. Listen, what I think people lose sight of here is that, beyond the statistics, it's not simply a matter of the horrific deaths of these victims. It's the people left behind. I couldn't help thinking about thousands of people in this country walking around with holes in their souls because a close relative or friend, a loved one, was wiped out like that. And it's, the fact that it's instantaneous is what makes it especially horrific in my mind. If you have a relative or a friend who has stage 4 cancer, you at least have a couple of weeks or months or something to be with them, to prepare for it, to know that it's happening. But what is it like to wake up in the morning, it's a normal day, and suddenly you hear that, your husband, your wife, your child, your parent is dead, just like that. It's incomprehensible to me. And it's disgusting that so many families have had to go through this kind of thing. And I mean, that we can talk more about this, and I will later, but I just want to just begin by saying that the heart of the problem is this deep, deep philosophical divide in this country, which was summed up by someone who I know you don't think much of, George, Andrew Sullivan, but he had once in a while, Sullivan says something that I think is worth holding on to. And a couple of years ago, he wrote this: to the left, abortion represents freedom and guns represent death. To the right, guns represent freedom and abortion represents death. And I think that really sums it up, because, leaving aside the left-wing perspective for a moment, we sometimes wonder, how can people who claim to be pro-life be so casual about the proliferation of guns in our society? And it really is, I think, at the root of this cultural idea that if I have a gun, I have protection, therefore I have more control over my life, and therefore I have more freedom. The poor innocent fetus in the womb doesn't have a choice, doesn't have freedom. That's why it's wrong to destroy it. And, we can agree or disagree with that. Or we can say that this is an oversimplification. But this is really, I think, the biggest challenge. The fact that there are millions and millions of Americans who really believe that the gun gives them a kind of freedom, a kind of control. It's an illusion. We know it's an illusion. Every statistic proves it's an illusion. But sometimes illusions, if they're held strongly enough, are very, very hard to break. And that's the challenge as I see it.
Well, maybe we should find out what they mean by freedom, Angela. Because freedom means different things to different people.
Yeah.
And it was interesting that, and I know we shall look at this later on. It was interesting that Pat Robertson had an interview. Was it this morning or yesterday?
I think it was this morning.
Tell me, yeah, pick it up from there.
It was very interesting because I came across it, just by a whim or whatever. But yeah, I think Pat Robinson was, I forgot what station it was on, CNN or something.
And it was CNBC.
Live, Pat Robinson?
No, CBN.
Live. I thought he was dead, first of all, but that's not.
Yeah, Christian Broadcasting Network.
But Pat Robinson got on there, and he had the his presenter that he was on the platform with. They had a taser and a gun, and the taser was yellow, bright yellow, and the gun was black. And the woman was showing him, going with the argument that the police officer said, and was like, she thought that she had the taser and stuff. And she handed the taser and gun over to Pat Robinson. And Pat Robinson was like, first of all, it's two different colors. And then secondly, he was like, the weight of both of them are very different. So how you got that mixed up, I really don't understand. So it goes to, just basically just squashes her whole argument that she didn't know that she had the taser and all that other stuff. And even in the video, I only saw, bits and pieces of the video because I'm at the point right now, I'm just tired of watching all these videos about this one. But even in the video, when she had the gun pulled, you can tell it was a gun. It was not a taser. It looks very different than a taser. It was an actual taser. She just kept saying, I'm going to tase you. Okay, first of all, we need to go back to elementary school and talk about the difference of words and how a taser and a gun, and look at our visuals, look at words. They were not matching up at all. And then when she shot the young man, Dante Wright, when she shot him, she's like, oh my God, I shot him. She didn't say, oh my God, I tased him. She said, I shot him. So she knew exactly what was happening in that moment. So all the, the fake ideas that, she didn't know what was happening, unless she was high, then that would be a whole nother argument that we need to bring into the her being high on duty. That would be another conversation that we need to talk about. But for the most part, what's happening with all these shootings and, the police are out of order, citizens are out of order. It's just so much unrest within this country, and it needs to get a handle on, seriously.
Right. I know we shall talk about police shootings later on. There's something just as part of this Pat Robertson intervention is the fact that this afternoon, midday, there was a news flash that Liberty University is suing Jerry Falwell Jr. for $10 million.
For what?
For what? Well,
really?
Well, yeah, I didn't read all the details about it.
I got it.
Now you see, and you, I don't know, Phil perhaps has an understanding of how the Christian right came about from the 60s to right now, and how they changed about just about everything, including this gun culture that we are discussing today. we're going to be talking about the prevention aspect of it. But let me just give you a couple of data that everybody knows. The U.S. is one of the most has the highest incidence of gun violence.
Yes.
Almost the most number of guns.
Mm-hmm.
Although on a per capita basis, Switzerland and Finland have the highest. The difference between Switzerland and the United States is that there aren't any gun violence over there.
Right.
So it seems to me that people understand that having a gun doesn't mean that you have the power or the freedom to do anything you want with it.
Right.
But we seem to think that once you have a gun, you have the power and you have the freedom as well to do anything you want with it. So among the industrialized nations, the US is at the top of gun violence. England has some of the least. Interesting. England has some of the least. Part of this of it is because in England, most police officers do not walk with guns.
Right.
Yeah, they carry a baton. And then
there's gun control laws there too.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the Americas, only Central America, particularly, and Venezuela and Central America, that's where you have most of the guns. Those are the countries that top the list in the Americas, and the United States comes just the third. However, in their case, their guns are the gun violence is propagated by gangs and drug dealers.
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's almost the opposite. Yes, there are gangs in various cities and stuff like that, but when there is an incident of shooting among the gangs, those are people they know, and often it's just one or so per. I don't know how often. Most of the shootings here are by people we so-called the lone wolves.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we have a lot of shootings by basically domestic violence. And then, of course, you have shootings by police. It is an interesting thing. Only when you compare to the rest of the world, only in Iraq do we have more shootings than the US. Then we have Venezuela and Central America. It's not a very nice picture. It's not a very nice picture. So what do we do about it? A lot of things have been talked. What are the prevention programs that we should be embarking on? Any of you?
Well, I have an interesting column that I saw, and I'm not very good at screen sharing, so I'm just going to read from it, by Nicholas Kristof, the Times columnist, who has written a lot of thoughtful pieces about gun control. And I think part of that is because, he grew up in a small town in rural Oregon, so he knows both sides of the debate over guns. He understands the culture where they're popular, and he understands the reasons why people want to regulate them. And I should say, we've been encouraged to say gun regulation rather than gun control, because control has become kind of a loaded term. I understand that. Yeah. And I think it does make sense to just talk about regulation, because really that's what it's about. We are not trying to, again, confiscate all of the guns out there. I mean, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea if many of the guns out there were confiscated, but it's not going to happen. So let's be honest and deal with things as they are, which is to regulate the sale, the possession, etc., the way we do with most dangerous things such as cars. Now, in a column a couple of weeks ago, Kristof said that the most important thing he thought was to crack down on ghost guns. These are the things where they're kind of, the weapon is sold unfinished or as a kit. He says, white nationalists have seized upon the chance to build secret arsenals through ghost guns. Last year, a supporter of the extremist Boogaloo movement allegedly used a ghost weapon to kill a law enforcement officer, and the men accused of plotting to kidnap Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer also had ghost guns. And he goes on and on. And, you know, we have heard something about this, and I've heard about these ghost guns, the kind of things that can be computer generated. I mean, essentially, they manage to get through and escape any kind of regulations that we do have because they're so much harder to trace because, you know, they're not a complete
registered
until right together. Right. So that's a first step. Christoph in his article says he's kind of skeptical about another assault weapons ban because he feels the statistics prove that it didn't save a lot of lives. Now, I would argue if even one of these massacres could be prevented because some psychopath or political fanatic didn't get his hand on an AK-47, that would be a good thing. So I'm certainly in favor of a ban, you know, of reinstating the assault ban. But I do think we have to look at the practical measures, such as what Joe Biden proposed recently. I believe he talked about ghost guns. I know he also talked about
pistol stabilization. Pistol stabilization.
Pistol stabilization, yeah. He's appointed, you know, a former ATM officer to, or ATF, I think, to head the bureau. And if he gets through Congress, this is a man who I think has a particular knowledge and commitment to curbing the dangers of gun proliferation. And I mean, these things can be done. The question also, though, becomes what else can be done? What can only be done through legislation. And that, of course, is the challenge right now, given the current Congress, which is another reason why the filibuster has to be, if not eliminated, it has to become a talking filibuster again, rather than the current situation where a senator can just sort of like signal, I'm filibustering, and that's it. No, you got to get out on the floor and talk like Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. You got to talk until you drop if you want to oppose this bill badly enough. Yes. It's like, you know, it's right up there with voting reform and half a dozen other things that will not get through this Congress because you need 60 votes. That's just insanity and it's got to stop. But going back to what I said, let's see what we can do on the executive level. Let's see what we can do on the state level. A number of states have made progress in this area in recent years. Beyond that, barring a change in the filibuster, we have to figure out ways to change the conversation, I guess. That's, you know, what I would say.
Yeah, right. And I think that even with not, because like you said, Phil, you know, the conversation between regulation versus control. It's not that we're trying to take your guns or anything like that. Because I think that, you know, if you have guns, if you are using them properly and all that, that's wonderful. Why do you need to have a assault rifle? That's another conversation right there, because what are you going to kill? I mean, does it take that much to kill a deer? Like, seriously, that's a conversation right there. But the fact that, and I'm looking at some statistics now, the survey by the Pew Research Center, and they say how that 4 in 10 U.S. adults say they live in a gun-owning household, and about 48% or higher grew up in households with guns, and 59% say at least some of their friends own guns, and the numbers get a little bit worse than that. So I think that where we are in America, and with all these shootings and stuff like that, I see it from so many different angles by me living overseas and seeing how it has been regulated in other countries. Because, like, for example, in Italy, even if you want to get a rifle to go hunting, you have to sit down and talk with a psychologist. You have to sit down and get other exams and stuff that you have to go through. We need that here in America, because you could just automatically just go on the street, find somebody who nobody knows his background or anything, but you know he has guns, and you can just automatically get a gun. That's a problem. And even the fact that there's no regulation in terms of like younger people being able to get guns, that's the issue. within America that I think that we need to like really sit down and come to the table and have conversations. And even in reading this article and some of the numbers that you sent George earlier, the fact that the NRA has just filed bankruptcy because that's I think that's crazy. But the fact that they're, going after the issue of guns and saying, it's our right, you're taking away, our right to hold guns and all that. Nobody is trying to take your rights. We're not trying to do anything. That we're trying to get a handle on the many of shootings that are happening, the many of the people that are losing their family members, like you said, Phil, just on a whim because somebody is irritated and had a bad day and they wanted to shoot somebody is ridiculous. So it's so many other issues that, as a compound upon this conversation, and our lawmakers and our senators and everything need to just stop fighting the issue because it's not going to get better. It's not going to get any better because the numbers are steadily going up with the mass shootings and the people that are getting guns. And what it comes down to is a form of capitalism. They're making money off of this stuff. And that's a problem.
Yeah,
Yes.
and Angela, sorry, just two things I want to say. First of all, what you said about, what are you going to do? How are you going to shoot a deer? That reminded me of a quote from the late Senator Barry Goldwater, who we all know was a staunch liberal. And he actually said, I think back in the 80s, just before he retired, he said, something like any idiot who needs an AK-47 to kill a deer shouldn't be hunting in the first place. Because he was very clear on this. Yes, he was very pro-gun. He was very pro-hunting and all that. But he knew these types of guns are there for only one purpose, to kill as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. But in terms of politics, I was also thinking about the NRA because when I heard about some of the troubles they've had over the last few years, and the scandals and the defections and the infighting and declaring bankruptcy, it'd be very easy, for those of us on the other side to say, great, the dragon has been slain, and now they were such an obstacle to serious gun regulation, now we can have it. Well, it turns out, obviously, that's not the case. And I think the reason for that is, it was easy to put up the NRA as the big boogeyman. But the fact is, the NRA was supported. People gave money to the NRA. They were members of the NRA because the NRA was telling them what they already wanted to hear. I do think the NRA was guilty of politicizing the debate and kind of expanding it with this paranoid rhetoric about, you need as many guns as possible because the liberals and the government are going to try to take them away. But even without them, even now that they're pretty much out of the scene, you still see all these Republican senators and congressmen, like coming up and saying, you're not taking my guns and my people don't want their guns. So it's clearly deeper than one disgusting organization, and we have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Yes, I do believe, though, the NRA should actually get out of the scene, and I'm so happy that they're out of the scene. There seems to be a lot of this idea of, we need our rights, or we have our rights, you cannot take our rights away, without thinking about responsibility. If you go back to history, the NRA has not been wasn't as powerful as it is, or rather as it was a couple of years ago, and right now they've gone down. But that's because of the changing mood from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s. So the NRA just got political, like you said, and in during the time of was it Hester? Who was the president of NRA? Who used to be an actor?
Heston, Charleston Heston, yes.
Charles Heston. So
right. Mm-hmm.
So that group,
dead hands.
Exactly,
Yeah.
And that was in the 80s. Just because Bill Clinton was coming in, and they thought Bill Clinton was going to take away guns from them. Nobody thought about a president taking away guns from everybody. And that idea that somebody is going to take away guns from you, that the government is going to be taking away guns from you, has persisted over the last 30 years. I don't think there is anything that it hasn't been borne out, because the Democrats who are, 3 Democrats right now who have come to be president have never done anything against them, have never taken away guns, and have only been trying to to walk around the edges, not really going after the Second Amendment. This idea that a well-regulated militia, that this issue of rights is built on this lie that the Constitution protects individual rights, which it does not, because the Second Amendment is about a well-regulated militia, which at the time, yes, they took part in the Revolutionary War, but they're what we now call the reservists and the National Guard. They are regulated. Mm-hmm. They're not everybody just coming about and walking around with their AK-47 or something like that. But this Supreme Court, I think, has made a major problem worse. I think apart from the New York case that they're likely to take, the last case they dealt with was in December, actually 4 months ago. It was a case out of DC, and DC wanted to ban assault rifles, and the court said that it is an individual right. So you can see the trajectory from a well-regulated militia to individual rights, which allows just a rule of the jungle. That's a rule of the jungle, right? So one of the things that you have to do, even before we go into some preventative measures, is how do you ensure that the Supreme Court does not continue on this trajectory of allowing just about everybody, including those who are sick, who have mental health problems, to continue to have guns without any kind of regulations?
Well, George, it was the Supreme Court back in 2008 or 2009, and I forget the name of the decision, but I think it also involved the District of Columbia that really, I wouldn't say opened the door, but kind of codified what had been going on in saying that the First Amendment, it was kind of the Second Amendment that was previously kind of like an understood thing. They made it official. Yeah, this gives you, the American, the right to own a gun, or really, any number of guns, any kinds of guns. Now, I think that Scalia, who was the prime mover in that decision, and the other rightists who are still on the court, and people like Thomas and Alito, and the new ones like Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, these men to some degree have blood on their hands. Let's not mince words. However, I will point out that in that decision, the court did say specifically that they are not saying, this decision does not mean that no regulation of guns is permissible. Right. Not say that. They definitely left open the door, and that's why you've had these, succeeding cases in the years since then, because I think more and more, particularly when you have right-wing gun groups opposing states and localities, and the goal of that is try to open the door further and say, let's get the court to reject this law and that law. So the sort of death by a thousand cuts. But I do think that there is the possibility that in some cases the court will say, okay, we can at least leave open the door, at least based on the decision 9 or 12 years ago, that there is a possibility court will say that regulation X or regulation Y can stand. It is possible, I'm trying to be an optimist about this.
That's very convincing.
But, a cautious optimist, I would say.
Angela, there was a shooting, of course, in Chicago.
Chicago, yeah.
Yes, and I highlight us on the issues there, and dispel this issue about gang violence.
Well, Chicago, like any other of the major cities, is a city. You're gonna have levels of crime and organized crime, some unorganized. Is just a city to city lifestyle type of thing. But particularly what's happened with this story, and I don't know the full gamut of what went down, but this young man from what I've been told by colleagues and stuff, is that he was a terror, a menace to society, just period. not that requires him to get shot, but he had been in that lifestyle. He had been, running the streets and doing a lot of just crazy things in the streets, and a lot that goes to our young people not being in school, with us being with COVID. So a lot of them are bored and doing extracurricular activities. But then also the fact of depending upon the neighborhood that you're in, a lot of these young people are getting connected with different gangs and stuff because they're looking for protection, when they're walking back and forth to their schools and stuff. None of it is a good thing, but there are so many loops connected to all the stuff that's went down. So this young man, I think he was 13 years old, had a weapon on him, but prior to his engagement with the police at the time, he was already running that specific day, running through the neighborhood and terrorizing people. And one thing led to another. He had his altercation with the police. They shot him, and so forth and so on. Definitely not promoting the fact that, you need to just shoot people. What I am really, really passionate about with all these shootings that are happening on an individual level within the cities and stuff comes to the training of our polices. I'm definitely not in support of like completely just getting rid of the police officers or the police at all, because there are still other departments within the police force that handles so much other stuff that, like, small issues, like if there was a traffic jam, we need somebody to maneuver and all that other stuff. But the training that goes to teaching these individuals how to de-escalate situations, the training that goes into the people that are patrolling these neighborhoods, that they have no investment in those neighborhoods, it's an issue within America. It's so many different things that are hinged upon these police that are shooting down folks at just random stops and different things like that. Within the city of Chicago, since I'm here, a lot of stuff that has been happening, if I could make a point back to and point fingers, and I'm gonna just be direct and point fingers, a lot of it has to do with what's happening within the police force and how they're engaging with people within the communities that they're not living in, people within these communities that they have no investment in these communities. And the fact that there's a mindset with, in terms of how Black and Brown communities are viewed, that they're seen as inhuman, that they are seen as like, they don't care, so why should we care type of mentality. And all of that plays in the interaction that the cops have with people in these communities. And it's a problem.
That's true, because this idea of somebody, the shooting in of Dante Wright just tells you how bad the situation is, because why would they get involved in such a minor offense just at a time when the county itself was unattainable?
Yes.
And then she was training somebody. So if this is a person who was training two other officers, then what confidence can you have on that kind of training? And people have been talking about training. It really doesn't seem to me that training is the issue. I think we have a police force or police forces all around the country that are driven more by other factors than what they're supposed to do. So why would we not have a lot more, say, social workers, dealing with such minor problems? Why don't we have the police force only dealing with certain problems and not, life, quality of life issues? Quality of life, what do they care about quality of life?
Yeah.
Why would somebody want to have the freedom to have a gun and all whatever, but still accept police regulating their quality of life.
Yeah,
that is just not. It doesn't make sense. And so I'm so happy that there are a couple of programs around the country, preventative programs that are going to benefit from some money that Biden's infrastructure funding is going to offer, about $5 billion.
Yeah.
And just to run through some of them, one of them is is a program that in Boston, actually. So here's what it does. Well, here's what Biden wants to do. This money will go to these organizations that are geared towards working with the communities, identifying who is going to have a potential problem, people at risk, and then trying to give them a job or housing or health services. And if they refuse, then they get locked up. I don't know how far that is gone, but they've been, because they're community-based, they haven't gone to that point where somebody says, okay, you're locking me up, I'm going to go to court to stop me from doing that because you're infringing on my rights. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of these things, a lot of people who have problems, and I know from experience, you don't have problems, you don't start having problems outside of your home. No. Most of the problems are known within the home. Mm-hmm. And so if you can start from the home, and that also requires you to have that confidence of family members. Yes. So you have to work with people who can engender that kind of confidence. And social workers are much better than police officers in doing this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a whole laundry list of reforms that people have been talking about since last year that need to be put out, particularly, in large, diverse metro areas. One thing is, yes, as you say, George, having more social workers or domestic violence specialists, or just, people, what's the word I'm thinking about? Conflict resolution, people who are not there to escalate the situation, that either the cop doesn't come at all, or he is there only as like last resort backup in case like an abusive husband draws a gun or something like that, but not the first resort. Having more, policewomen of color patrol the neighborhoods, live in the neighborhoods where they patrol, also a good thing. Stop giving the police forces military-style weapons again that they don't need and use. Those are I would say, I don't want to say easy, but those are perhaps the simpler things to do. I think the more complicated thing is kind of working on changing the culture of policing, particularly policing minority neighborhoods, because what you keep seeing in all these instances, from George Floyd to Dante Wright to, half a dozen others, it always seems to be the same thing.
Right.
Stopped for a minor quality of life offense, a broken taillight, an expired license, passing a phony $20 bill. How does this escalate into this situation? And I have to believe, I could be wrong. We never see the in-between. And I have to believe that in that in-between, there are too many cops who just feel, hey, he talked back to me. Hey, he pushed. Hey, he resisted.
Yeah.
He didn't say, yes, sir, officer, I'll do whatever you say. Well, guess what? If you live in a community where you don't trust the cops,
you're not going to say that. Yes.
Exactly. And if you're a cop, if you're a police chief, you have to make it clear to your officers, hey, your gun, your badge doesn't give you this absolute power that people are going to kiss your butt and bow down. You're going to face people who don't like the idea that you're arresting them, and you have to know how to deal with it without killing them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's going to happen. Because police also don't want to be, they don't want to be arrested, but they want to arrest people.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Oh my God. And then the crazy thing is when you are dealing with police officers, in these communities, they, and violence and stuff is happening. They go to these homes and tell the people to talk. And if you want resolution, you need to tell what happened. But the police officers themselves don't even tell on their fellow officers. That no snitching stuff. They don't snitch on their own.
Yeah.
They don't even snitch on their own. So how are you going to uphold and say, we're trying to help, we're trying to protect, but you don't even follow the same rules and regulations that you're trying to now arrest somebody and uphold the law about? And then in addition to that, a lot of these officers that are going into these neighborhoods, most of it is a power and control type of thing. Yep. Because somebody talked back to them, now you're in your feelings and you're upset because you're embarrassed in front of your colleagues. So now you want to show who's boss. That's a problem. Just like they have specialized departments for negotiators and help them de-escalate situations. All of these officers need to go through that same training and learn how to de-escalate situations.
Actually, that data that is coming out of New York and a few other cities, Baltimore recently passed a law that would basically take away the immunity, right? Now, the data that has come out shows that the police force in any city, most of them are okay. There's usually 1, 2, 3 that have a lot of complaints against them. And they are left to continue to do the same thing over and over and over.
Eric Scholten had about like 13 or 14 complaints on his record, and nothing was done.
He should have been fired.
Exactly. But why do the police chiefs not come out and get ahead of the problem? Because they support it. But not only do they support it, if you look at the police culture, there's one thing that is interesting. Within the police, election is only in one area, the police unions. And the police union officials are more, they have a lot more power than the leaders of the police departments. And they have more money. They get paid a lot more.
Yes.
And that is where they have a lot of control. And what they decided to do, like everybody else, like the gun industry and all of those, was to get political. And so in their negotiations, contract negotiations, they've been actually getting more than they deserve. All of these rules that bring opacity in the way in which you can get access to their data, get access to how much they've done or how bad they are, how they've been, how many complaints against them, and things like they have to be given about 5 days during which they can line up their stories before they're interviewed, even by the internal service agencies. It's just out of control. If you do anything, they arrest you right now and they take you to jail. How come they all have to have 5 days?
Even when they have visual footage, cameras on them showing what they did wrong, it still takes 27 years for them to get arrested and then to go to trial, and it makes no sense. It's ridiculous.
They lie all the time.
There definitely has to be a way to curb the power of police unions. I mean, we saw it in Minneapolis. We see it here in New York, to kind of like stop them being the roadblock to any serious reform. I mean, obviously, I'm generally a pro-union person, but, I have my limits on this. And I mean, it doesn't mean like any union should be allowed to dictate public policy. So that's another part of the equation, definitely. And another thing, one other thing I would say is that I don't want to blanket all cops with a negative designation. I mean, I've seen some left-wing writers saying things like, well, the police are traditionally there to protect the property of the rich, and back in the 13th century England, you had the Sheriff of Nottingham. Of course, that's what he was doing. But the profession kind of evolved a little bit since then, at least since the early 20th century, where really, crime fighting is as important as protecting public property. And I do think that not every cop joins the force because he or she just likes to lord it over people with a gun. I mean, yes, some of them do, obviously. But there are others, I believe, who sincerely believe in the idea of public service. And I'm saying all this because I think that another reform that needs to happen is that it has to be easier for cops like that to, to change the culture, to get ahead, yes, to maybe inform on other officers if they have to really not be afraid. Like we talk about the 5 cops who were standing around.
Not to be afraid to intervene.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the 4 or 5 cops who were standing around when Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck.
Did nothing.
Right. And I mean, they weren't all white. One of them was a Laotian immigrant. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
I have to believe that at least maybe 1 or 2 of them had the slightest little doubt or would have said, hey.
No, but even the other one of them was a mixed race, black and white, right?
There you go. And there is this intimidation in too many police forces where, you don't say anything, you don't intervene because then, the other guys are going to gang up on you later. So there has to be a change in the culture that the good cop is encouraged to speak out and do something so that the bad cops don't dominate. But again, it's one part of many, many, many reforms that have to take place.
Exactly. There was a case actually out of Buffalo like yesterday. And that case was of this woman. She was a police woman in 2006, 2007. And she intervened when her partner
Yes, I saw that.
Up somebody.
Yeah.
And you know what they did? They made her life miserable. And then they fired her.
Yeah.
It was until last year, after the George Floyd incident, that she got a lawyer to go and represent her. And she won the case. So that is the idea that, if somebody is doing bad, somebody else has to intervene.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Serpico, the movie and the real life story that it was based on. You saw how Serpico is ostracized by his fellow cops, and this is back in the 60s and 70s, for blowing the whistle on police corruption. Now, obviously, you still have police corruption scandals, but I seem to have heard a lot fewer of them in recent years because I think the police culture has changed, that there are at least avenues for honest cops to report on dishonest cops. And perhaps what we need is a similar thing for cops who are not brutal to report on cops who are.
Right.
Hopefully that'll change the culture.
Because the thing is, even with just looking at the whole take on police officers, it is not all cops that are bad. I will never, ever say that. But those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% that are bad, they making it bad and looking bad for everybody else because they are the ones, their actions, their words are speaking the loudest among all things. And because this is a problem that, higher up administrators and, the politicians are involved. And like you said, feel they're unionizing and making it political and stuff on so many levels because everybody has their hand in the pot and nothing is getting done. It is causing so much animosity with people within the community on believing cops in terms of serving and protecting. And then even, you have the cops that take their power and do wrong with it. Like, some of them are supposed to be protecting some of the people that are in cases, but they're allowing mob bosses or whomever else to let folks know where these people that did talk and are about to present a case before them. So it's so much within the police department that needs to be just filtered out very quickly.
Right. The thing is that talking about the relationship between the police and the community. I told my son wanted to go to join New York Police, and I told him no, he can't do that because it's not going to be a win situation. There's going to be something wrong either way. So just don't do that. There is actually an institution in the United States that has had a very good track record with regards to accountability, because the problem here is accountability. It's the military. In the military, you do something wrong, they are going to tell on you, and they'll come and your own colleagues, your own partners will come and testify against you. There is the military justice. We don't have the same thing with the police.
Yeah.
Part of it is because, the police, part of the Constitution, the police there's nothing federal.
Right.
And then there's actually nothing state. Police is very much a community thing.
It's a
problem is, why can't we have, in communities that suffer from police violence, why can't we have people from those communities being part of the police force? It is this perception that creates that problem. The perception that we're not working together. We are basically enemies. Mm-hmm. So nobody wants to join the police force, and the police force is coming to you like you are already a culprit. So there is no atmosphere that encourages dialogue.
Yeah, and recently, I think this week I saw they're doing a new initiative with historically Black colleges. I think it's the Lincoln University. They're initiating the first police training with the historically Black college because they want to raise their numbers, with minorities joining the police academy and stuff. I think it's for right now, we'll say it's a thumbs up. We'll see how it works out. But it's so much deeper than just, let's go recruit people of color to be police officers. It's part of the culture that needs to be changed. It's part of the administrators who, like you said, there is no accountability for what happens within the police station, police departments. Yes, the military is very, very different, even though they have their holds and stuff within certain areas within the military as well. But for the most part, if you do something on the military side, you're affecting the whole government. You're affecting the country. So yes, they're a little bit more hands-on. Okay, you're just fired, period. No ifs, ands, buts about it. There are certain things that the military has that should be implemented in terms of how structured and things are on the police station, because the military, there's no questions asked. If you get so many different complaints about you, you're just let go. Yeah. I don't care what your rank is. I don't care what your pension is. You're just let go. But within the police department, these people are allowed to resign and still get their benefits, still get all of this stuff. That's a problem. It's part of the culture that's a problem.
And Phil, on this, the issue that happened in the incident in Virginia, you remember?
Yes.
That you get somebody who is serving in the military, being roughed up by a police officer who should actually not even be there.
And he was training somebody as well.
He was also training somebody as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
right, yeah.
So who was serving the country much more than the other?
Yeah.
It's not cool. It's not cool.
The same thing about Breonna Taylor. I mean, she was a public servant. She was an EMT and
yes.
Yeah, truly.
Sleeping in her home.
Yeah. And George, I want to just to kind of like bring it back to our original topic today.
Yeah.
The answer, I mean, what some pro-police forces will or apologists will say is that, look, these are high crime neighborhoods. The statistics say that, you have to have a strong police presence. Okay. One reason that these are often high crime neighborhoods is the proliferation of guns, illegal guns. So you see, if there's one reform, I think that could almost address both of these problems, police violence and gun violence, right? Cut down on the traffic in illegal guns. Now, I mean, I think, the right-wing groups are still talking about challenging laws like we have here in New York, where you really, there's a heavy penalty for bringing in a gun from another state. Okay. But we need more regulations like that, because I think that's really, a major contributor to the problem. I personally have come to have a slightly more nuanced view of the gun issue over the years, and that I understand, I don't think that all gun owners are like monolithically evil. I mean, somebody who, lives in a high crime neighborhood and runs like a bodega or a liquor store, of course, I don't blame them for wanting to have a gun under the cash register. Some guy out in Wyoming or Idaho, I don't know why you want to shoot innocent animals and birds, but if you get your jollies that way, it's legal. Okay. Hunting is part of the culture. Fine. Go ahead. Have fun.
Right.
So it's like, it's not about, okay, every gun owner is a bad person. It's about understanding that the perspective, the guy in Wyoming who likes to hunt has to understand the perspective of the mother in Bed-Stuy who worries that her kid is not going to come home from school because a gang shot him. That's the kind of thing we have to work on. So, we shall see.
For me, this is where I'm absolutist. I mean, for the police, actually, I live with police next to me here, so I actually love police, except when they do stupid things. My uncle was a police officer in the colonial government, and so we've had police all our lives. But the one thing that I don't countenance is a gun. I consider a gun just like a snake. When I see a snake, I run away. I run away so fast. So is a gun. My son is in the military, and so one of the things we had was, you don't come here with a gun. And I don't want even to see those gun safe or anything that is related to a gun, because I don't want to have it in my conscience. It just is a visceral reaction I have with guns. I'm good to live in a neighborhood that is so bad, where there's a lot of whatever, but it's consciously I'll be fine if I can fight, but I don't want to fight with a gun, because a gun tempts me or tempts anyone to just shoot and kill.
Yeah.
Listen, George, I don't love guns either.
However.
No. In an ideal world, there would be no guns, just like there would be no weapons of any kind. But since we don't live in an ideal world, the next best step, I think, is to make sure that the wrong people, people who have no business having, don't get them. And number two, those who are in power to have them, learn how to use them sparingly and responsibly.
That's true. That's good. Thank you so much. This has been a very interesting debate, and Phil, thanks for suggesting this topic. For everybody there, I hope you love this conversation. So don't forget to share, to like, and also to subscribe. Also, take a look at our website, which is coming up very, very nicely. So until 2 weeks from now, bye-bye.